On October 15th, the Undervallis came out for Warframe, the newest major update the Digital Extremes has released. And while I think it was a pretty solid update, the update didn't just add its namesake, the Vallis Undermind, it also had a brand new quest called The Teacher, a narrative quest that serves as the introduction to the ever-important character Teshin, as well as an introduction and tutorial to basic modding. Along with both of these things, the newest Warframe release called Nico, whose design is based off of a mushroom, and almost all of his abilities are mushroom based, with his most hyped up ability being his power to turn into a little guy. A little mushroom guy. On top of all of these things, they also completely reworked Oberon, one of the frames I'd argue needed a rework more than any other. I mean, there are like a total of 6 Oberon mains across every platform before this update. I am not lying here. Now, I know that I've made 3 separate videos on this update already. Hell, I think I've actually made more than that. I'm milking this update harder than Bethesda has been milking Skyrim remasters for the past 13 years. But I have an excuse, and that excuse is that there's a lot to talk about when it comes to this update. And pretty much every video that I've dropped has had a different topic. So this is going to be my ultimate review on the update with an actual proper script written and everything, so I hope that is okay with all of you guys. There's also a video in the works about the lore of surrounding Nightcap, so expect that to drop here on Friday probably. If you become a member, you should have early access to see it today or tomorrow. Anyway, the first part of this update, the meatiest part I want to talk about, is the Vallis Undermind. The Vallis Undermine is a huge section of underground caves, okay, maybe not that huge, but a big section of underground caves under Fortuna or Vallis on Venus, and it's filled with all sorts of mushrooms, mushroom creatures, and then Corpus and the labs that they've built in the Vallis Undermine. The whole theme of this area is that Nephanio is trying to exploit the mushrooms colonies that are growing below the surface of Venus and take an experiment on the wildlife there. Our duty as the Tenno is to protect the Undermine from Nephanio while also assuring the safety of the creatures that live there, alongside any of the unfortunate debt slaves unlucky enough to be forced to work there by Nephanio. We do this with the help of Nightcap, the mysterious Australian-voiced Fortuna resident who has some sort of duty to protect the Undermines, as well as a complex relationship with the mysterious new mushroom Warframe, Nico. From what I explained here, it probably sounds like there's a pretty complex storyline involved with the Vallis Undermine, with all sorts of different missions. However, that's just not the case. The Vallis Undermine essentially acts as a very small and enclosed open world section, like the plains of Eidolon basically, except smaller and, well, enclosed, and only has bounty missions that take place inside it. This is one of my first initial complaints, and that's the fact there wasn't a whole lot of content released with this update. Generally, whole new areas at least come with a few story missions and some sort of new mechanics being introduced, but the Vallis Undermine is a relatively small update with just a new area added, bounty missions for that area, and then a new Warframe with just a couple new weapons. I'm talking about the Undermine specifically, not the other things that came alongside it by the way. But yeah, my biggest complaint is that the update is rather small. However, it's not terrible because I believe the quality of what we got is pretty great. And not only that, there's so many ease of life things that has been added when it comes to the Vallis Undermine bounties, specifically with this update. One thing that I really like is how after you complete bounties, a portal immediately appears that takes you to the exit of the area. Now you don't need to take it if you don't want to, but it's extremely convenient to have a way to instantly return to Fortuna after every bounty. It only saves a little bit of time. However, if you're grinding bounty after bounty, it's a great time saver and just makes the whole process easier than ever. It's something on paper that looks so small and unimportant, but actually in practice makes all the difference. I absolutely love it. Another positive thing about the Vallis Undermine is that you can rank up at your own pace. There's no standing cap, and on top of there being no standing cap, there's a completely new way to rank up your standing with mushrooms. Basically, you collect different mushrooms. Once you get enough of them, you can upgrade their rank in the field guide till they hit rank 3. And once they hit rank 3, you actually get points for your standing. Now this is a good and a bad thing. I like that there's no standing cap and that there's new and unique ways to get standing. However, the bad part is that what mushrooms you get every mission is completely random. Meaning that if you're unlucky and keep getting the same shrooms, it'll take a very long time to level up your standing. Thankfully, DE did think of this issue, and you can actually buy mushrooms with the currency you get from beating Vallis Undermine bounties. So it's not like being unlucky will screw you over forever, it'll just set you back a little bit. Something else I want to talk about is the actual design of the Undermine itself, and while I think that it looks amazing, I love how it looks and it's one of my new favorite areas in the entire game. The underground area, with the futuristic Corpus Labs and the unique mushroom theme, all combined create an absolutely mesmerizing setting, and I have absolutely loved exploring the Vallis Undermine. And I really do think it's beautiful and would love to see it expanded to a larger area in a future update. The bounties themselves are also the best version of bounties that we've ever seen when it comes to Warframe. The enemies that you need to spawn actually spawn, the objectives don't cover huge expanses of areas where it's easy to miss things, and they can be grinded out and beaten fairly quickly. I'm not sure if it's because the massive open world areas have trouble spawning enemies because they're so big, but the Vallis Undermind has zero of these issues, and bounties can be completed very quickly, especially since you're traveling short distances to each objective, alongside having an instant teleporter back to the entrance after you finish the bounty. The bounties are super streamlined and actually feel really good to play. I've been having a ton of fun with them, which makes grinding that standing and finding unique mushrooms that much easier, since you're actually enjoying it. The last thing I want to talk about, actually concerning the Vallis Undermine part of this update, is the Prince. Now, I'm not going to talk too much about him because I'm planning a lore video around him in Nightcap, but I will say I'm not the biggest fan of how the Prince functions. I don't like that you have to feed the Prince currency that you can use with Nightcap. It just feels bad throwing away all your hard-earned currency into Prince just to be able to see the story, which isn't told in the most interesting way possible, to be honest with you. But it isn't a huge complaint, and it's just not the best way of telling a story in my own personal opinion. With this update also came a brand new quest called The Teacher that was aimed at new players. The Teacher was meant to introduce one of the most important friendly characters in the game, Teshin, since his current intro to the main character wasn't exactly the greatest or most in-depth. Besides just introducing Teshin, this quest was also meant to properly introduce modding to new players, since there was an extreme lack of guidance when it came to that part of the game for those newer players. I'm not going to get into what the narrative is too much or spoilers, because I actually already have a different video that you can check out from last week on my channel, so go ahead and look into that if you're interested in hearing my opinions on the story and what actually happened within the quest. But overall, I think the narrative was well done, and that the quest had lots of fun foreshadowing that made it worth it for veteran players to play through. Not to mention, the quest had great cutscenes when it did have them, wonderful voice acting as normal, and good looking and unique settings to complete the pretty short quest. Even though I'm saying all of these positive things, the community as a whole wasn't nearly as happy with the quest as I am, with many particularly frustrated with how much it taught you about modding, which I do understand. As a tutorial, which DE largely hyped it up to be, there wasn't a whole lot of meat there. More than anything, it seemed like it was just supposed to make the players aware of mods, and that they should be using them and experimenting with them, more than actually detailing the best ways to use or how to best combine them. While a more in-depth tutorial would be nice, it would have been incredibly hard to make it narratively interesting, and being the second quest in the game after Vor's Prize, having a tutorial heavy quest that overstay its welcome could very badly affect new player retention. I think the quest being short with a solid narrative and intro to Teshin, while introducing you to mods to make sure you're actually using them, is perfectly acceptable. But I do understand the complaints that it didn't teach nearly as much as it should have, especially since DE was labeling it as more of a tutorial than a cinematic quest, at first at least. Overall, I liked it. It made Teshin way more likable, and it was a short and sweet quest. It didn't overstay its welcome at all. It also did a good job setting up what the player should be doing next by advising them to go to Fortuna on Venus. On top of the two major additions to the game, this update also came with a much needed Oberon rework and changes to how the most unpopular mechanic in the game, damage attenuation, actually functioned within the game. I have videos going into detail on both of these things, so I won't go crazy here describing the changes and what happened, and if you do want to hear me go in depth, go check out those videos. I think they cover pretty much everything you could possibly need to know about both of these changes. Let's start with Oberon here. Oberon was easily transformed into a much more powerful frame, and is now actually usable within the game without being a handicap that required extreme modding. Now Oberon isn't exactly unstoppable, but he's absolutely a more powerful and useful frame now. One of his most interesting changes was to his passive, which went from something that only boosted companions, think MOAs and Kubros, instead, Oberon now has the ability to basically have his own version of Mesmer Skin, like Revenant has, and it can automatically apply to the whole team. Pretty much every single one of Oberon's abilities got major changes, with the second and fourth ability getting the most of them, and overall, it was an all-around buff. The update just made Oberon a stronger frame, and like I said, if you want a more in-depth analysis, check out my Oberon rework video. Now let's talk about damage attenuation real quick. The two biggest changes they made was the level of damage attenuation being done will be based on each individual enemy's health. Enemies will be given more health with less damage attenuation in general, so the damage you do does feel better. On top of that, damage attenuation is now based on each individual and not the entire team together. Before it was based on average group damage, which could negatively affect members that are doing drastically lower or higher amounts of damage based on their teammates, and it just didn't feel right or fair, so now each individual person is skilled for their DPS when it comes to damage attenuation. This is definitely a positive change. While players doing insane amounts of damage will still have trouble, this will at least dull their pain just a little bit. That's my review for all of the major parts of the update. Besides Nico, who will be getting a full review here in a week or two, I don't want to rush and talk about how I like using him before I've had him for a while. So we're going to give that video some time and, give it some time before I drop that review. I hope that's okay with you guys. This has been a pretty good update with pretty much everything we've gotten, from the new quests to the rework to the Vallis Undermind itself being extremely high quality and fun to experience, with the only downside being that there isn't really a whole lot of it to experience. It's a fairly small amount of content for a major update. However, it would be insane to expect a ton of stuff when the old piece is releasing later this year. Huge shout out to my members, Jay and Simon King 5000, who support me a ton. I really appreciate it. Right now, becoming a member is mostly just supporting me, to be honest, but you also get early access to videos if you're interested in that. Thank you all so much for the support. Hope to see you all in the next video. Stay safe, stay blessed, and stay happy.